Jacob has a number of questions here. First of all, when you're out shooting at the river and you see lots of neat things to take pictures of but never get a good shot, um, obviously not seeing those photographs, I can't speculate completely or accurately maybe. But one of the biggest things that mistake people make when they're first getting started is when they see this great scene and they see so many cool features about it, they think, well, okay, I want to shoot really wide angle and I want to capture it all. And that's kind of really the mistake. Think about how you notice these things. When you are at the river and maybe you see somebody on the jet ski, maybe you see somebody who is diving, maybe you see whatever. Think about how you look at them. You don't focus on the whole scene at once, but you kind of come in on the details. That's a good way to approach the photography too. Focus in on the things that interest you, and rather than trying to capture everything in a scene, just zoom in and focus on the interesting elements. Now sure, have maybe a wide view so that you kind of give the overview, but then focus in on the things that are going to be most interesting to you and what captures your eye. Now in terms of composition, one of the things that people talk about is the rule of thirds, and this kind of goes back a really long ways, and I mean artists have been doing this for centuries, and if you look at even in the Renaissance is a good example. People were using the rule of thirds to kind of set up their compositions. Basically, if you divide your scene in thirds, both horizontally and vertically, then you get this series of like 9 boxes. And of course, I just was kind of sloppy with this; they're not exact. But basically, where these different lines intersect should be some of the main elements of your image. And they call it the rule of thirds, but of course you don't want to do that for every single image. But it's a good guideline to consider. So here I didn't exactly follow it. Now this is also a good example of where I decided to come in really tight. Here we generally have the main subjects here in the middle of the frame, so definitely didn't follow the rule of thirds there. Here I've got one in the first third, and here I've got one that's kind of middle, second third. So somewhat I followed it there. But I focused in on really, the details that I wanted to focus on here. The cowgirl boots, the spurs, and the feet of the animal that those are going to be used on. And so focusing in tight, using rule of thirds, those can be good examples for you. In terms of software that's cheap and inexpensive, I really recommend Lightroom 4. This is a very, very powerful program. Lightroom. Very powerful program, and it allows you to do so many things for a pretty low amount of money. To buy the full version, it would be a $300 program, but as a student, and I don't remember exactly if it's $75 or $79, you can buy the program for it with a student ID. That's a really good deal. You get a lot of software for the money. Now the caveat being is that they've already released the Lightroom 5 beta version, and you can download that for free to use until the full version is released. And in order to do that, I think it's labs.adobe.com, and you can download it, and it's just basically you give them your email, and then that's pretty much the extent of your commitment to Adobe. But you can use it for it. But they released that version usually maybe 3 or 4 months before the new product is released. So Lightroom 5 will probably be coming out sometime in the early fall. So if you buy Lightroom 4 now, then you can expect that there might be a new version, the Lightroom 5, coming up pretty soon. Now that said, everything that I've read about it makes it seem that while Lightroom 4 was a huge advance, from Lightroom 4 to Lightroom 5, maybe not going to be quite so much of a must-have upgrade. So. take that for whatever it's worth. I definitely recommend this program for anybody who does photography, even casually. In terms of different genres of photography, you listed portraits, sports, and what are things that you maybe not have heard of. The easy answer here is that if there is something that interests you, then that can be a viable subject for your photography. So portraits. I mean, even you break that down. You have baby pictures. You have children's portraits. You have senior pictures. You have wedding portraits. You have boudoir portraits. Even pornography portraits. Those are all things that you can use to make a living. Now, are all of those something that I recommend? Obviously not. Find the things that interest you and pursue those. In terms of commercial photography, you have basically still life, which can be like food for magazines. It could be makeup and perfumes, and those tend to be really good clients to have, because those are high expensive kinds of shoots. You would have working with models for ads for editorial use for magazines. You could have fashion photography, sports, pretty much any sport under the sun. Pretty much the sky's the limit here. If there's something that you enjoy, then you're going to be able to photograph it. Macro photography, people enjoy. Microscopic photography, telescopic. You might enjoy the night sky, so you might want to get a rig for using with the telescopes. All of these things are options, and there's a market for all of that kind of work. Now, is it going to be easy to make a living in all of those kind of things? Maybe, maybe not. It really comes down to finding your audience. How do you make sure you have the right amount of light, and so they look in real life? And what brand do I use was the best camera? Everybody says the cliche answer, the best camera is the one you have with you. For most people, that's going to mean a cell phone camera. If you have a smartphone, it's probably going to have a pretty decent camera. And I think they're to the point where you might be kind of hard pressed to justify buying a point and shoot camera, because especially iPhones, they do a pretty good job. In terms of best camera, in terms of affordability versus function, a digital SLR is probably going to fit that category. This is going to allow you to have removable lenses. They've got a little bit bigger sensor, and the bigger the sensor, the better the image quality is going to be. If you are wealthy, then I would say the best camera would be a digital medium format camera. Some of those cameras, Hasselblad is kind of in my mind, industry leader. You can get an 80 megapixel camera that will just knock your socks off for the low price of about $50,000. So it just kind of depends on what the budget is, but generally speaking, shoot with whatever you have with you. Learn how to use whatever gear you have to its best ability, and that's going to be the best advice. Using what you have to capture images is going to be more important than having the absolute best gear. Computers have been probably for your whole life, and cameras are like that now. There are so many advances in electronics that what is today's best is going to be tomorrow's medium, and what's going to be next week's old junker. So it really comes down to making an investment in having good quality glass lenses and stuff like that, more than a particular camera. In terms of brand, I use Canon gear. That's just because that's what I started with. I'd recommend, if you're looking for a camera, go to the store, see what feels good in your hand, because all of the current cameras are going to do a pretty good job for you. And Canon and Nikon are probably the two biggest ones, but Pentax, Olympus, Sigma, they all make really nice cameras too. And the advantage of going with either Nikon or Canon is that there's going to be more gear made for those particular brands, just because they have the biggest market share. In terms of exposure, using the built-in exposure meter, it only goes so far, because they generally will take in the whole scene, and so sometimes you need to adjust what the camera is giving you, and that's what you call exposure compensation. All but probably the very, very cheapest cameras, I mean even my cell phone allows this, will allow you to change the exposure. And the reason that you would do this is if, say, you're photographing some friends out on a bright sunny day, the whole scene is going to be, maybe well exposed, but the faces are going to be dark. Now that'd be a great example of, you got to expose for the important part of the scene. Then you have to decide, is the scene the most important, or is it the portraits? And if it's the portraits, then you might have to overexpose the scene, and that's where you would have to bump up the exposure compensation a little bit to make up for that. Now, every camera is going to be different in how you do that. Just understand that you can change these things on virtually all cameras that you might be using today, and go from there. So colors be the same as they are in real life. That's kind of a couple of different things. So first of all, if you're shooting in JPEG mode, which is what the default is for pretty much every camera I've ever used, you have to understand the camera is making certain decisions based on contrast and saturation and sharpness of an image. Now, if you're shooting in RAW mode, which is you mostly need to be in a digital SLR type camera for that. That's going to allow you to make a lot of those changes yourself, but you have to make them in a software program. And it's going to give you very much more flexibility. It's going to require a little bit of extra time to do, but the key is that you need to have a calibrated monitor. And so to calibrate it, you need a tool called a colorimeter. Basically, you plug it into a USB, and it measures the output of the screen. Now, without that, you can't really trust what you're seeing, because you don't know if it's a well-calibrated monitor or not. And so this is a raw file, and I'll show you how easy it is to change color. You can see that here we're setting as ASHOT, changing it to auto changes a little bit, to daylight changes a little bit, to shade, to fluorescent. Now obviously this doesn't look very good, but if you don't have a well calibrated monitor, you might not know that. This might look the best of all of those options, but if you have a poorly calibrated monitor, but obviously when you go to make a print, then it's not going to look very good. Or if you share it on Facebook even, somebody who's got a well calibrated monitor might think, oh, that's a cool picture, but why did you decide to make it look all blue? For example. So colorimeter is a very important tool to use for anybody that is serious about photography. You can buy these things for maybe the least expensive ones, maybe about $80 or $90. Is there a reason why I do photography, and what's my favorite picture of all, and why? I do photography because I enjoy it, basically. That you could ask the same question of anybody. Why do why are you a mechanic? Why do you enjoy working on cars? Or why are you a nurse? Why? Any job that you like and enjoy, probably you're gonna have the same kind of answers. For me, it's a great creative outlet. It's a great mix of the technical and the creative, and I find it very satisfying. So hopefully that's enough to answer your question there. Favorite picture of all and why? There are a number of pictures, and it depends on the reason. One of my favorite pictures here is of my dog, Little Bit. I photographed this probably within the week before she died of cancer. And so, here she was getting towards the end of her life. She was looking a little rough. She didn't have that same, life spark in her eye, and we came down for a session to the studio, and she just really perked up. And so because of that, this is an important image to me, because it has a lot of meaning to me. There are lots of family pictures that I could say the same sort of thing, and so anything that has a meaning on a level like that certainly is part of it. In terms of creatively, things that I enjoy, anything that expresses my vision fully. So these kind of images probably qualify. These are things that I kind of made with my own mind, and it wasn't something that I just kind of found. Those are the things that I enjoy. And some of these obviously more than others. A lot of the macro work I really enjoy. This is a great example. It's very simple, the colors, it's a graphic kind of image. These are the kinds of things that I enjoy creating. What would I recommend for beginning photographers, and what is stock photography? So stock photography is basically photographs that are made on speculation and then sold. A license is sold after the fact, and those licenses can be sold for things like calendars and greeting cards, or it could be used for selling a particular product or whatever. Here I put up a few of my images I licensed through Corbis, and an example here might be this image here. If it ever pops up, perhaps somebody who sells cat scratching toys might want to buy this to help sell their particular model. Stock is something that has been around for a long time in photography, and today what we're starting to see is there's now a pretty big market for stock video footage as well. And so when somebody goes to make a production, I guess that's the opposite side of it. So stock is all in speculation, and the other side of that might be stuff that was commissioned work. So somebody might hire you directly to take a picture of a cat, a scratching post or something like that. Pretty much any genre of photography is appropriate for stock photography. Even news photography is something that people would license as stock. For example, if I took a photograph of an explosion, somebody might license that stock photograph then to run in a paper in New York, or wherever that story is going to be in all of the news publications, or it might be used on the evening news and talking about the event. So it can be pretty much any genre, but basically it's something that's created on speculation and then licensed after the fact. In terms of what my recommendations are, if you're going to be a serious hobbyist or advanced, I would recommend an entry-level digital SLR camera. And if you have a Costco membership, I'd say just go and get one of the kits they have there, because they have a nice package of stuff for not that much money, relatively speaking. It's still a lot of money. If it's something that's kind of more of a casual, then I would say just next time you upgrade your cell phone, get something that has a good camera built in, and just do that, because the key is that you can have the best camera ever, but if you keep it in a bag at home, then it's worthless to you. If it's something that is small enough to carry with you, if it's something that you have with you all the time, then it's going to better suit your needs. So there's really too many variables that would answer this. If you have specific needs in mind, then by all means shoot me an email, and we can discuss what might be best for you. But generally speaking, if you have if you want to be a serious an advanced user, hobbyist or otherwise, then get an SLR type camera where you can change lenses and everything. Otherwise, probably a really good cell phone camera is going to be your best option. Point and shoot cameras probably these days are phasing out because the cell phone cameras are getting to be so much better. How did I get into it in the first place? It was kind of a series. I bought this first camera in advance of a trip to Hawaii, figuring, this is paradise, I need to be able to capture it. And very soon after, my dog was diagnosed with cancer, and I wanted to have a lot of good pictures to remind her, have for her memories. And so that's kind of what started it. I enjoyed it so well, I started taking some classes, and one thing kind of led to another. Working with pets, how do you capture animals? They're so squirmy. The more light you have, the better, because that means shorter shutter speeds. And they can be super squirmy, but if they park their butt for half a second, that's more than what you need for most exposures. So that definitely helps. Learning to have different tricks. Some animals are going to like toys, some are going to like treats, some are going to like just to be kind of ignored, and then you kind of sneak in shots. The best advice is to work in a contained area, and if that means closing a door in a room, then that can be very good, because the key is you don't want them to be able to escape, but secondarily you want to be able to eliminate distractions, and the more that they're focused on you, the better it is. If you want to work with pets yourself, then I would say send me an email, because that's kind of the bullet point answer, but there's lots and lots and lots that can go into that, and that can be a whole many hours long discussion in and of itself. Okay, so I already discussed stock photography a few moments ago. Which of my focuses do I enjoy the most, and why? That, I have to say, it really depends. I like to have a balance in my life, and certainly I really enjoy pets, and so working with animals is very satisfying. But I would not enjoy doing that all the time, because working with pets is a lot of work, or it can be a lot of work, or it can be super easy. But it's always very fast-paced. You need to be thinking ahead about what the animal might be doing. You need to have all of your gear kind of absolutely set, because you don't have time to change in between. And that kind of wears on you in a different way. And so a nice balance to that might be landscape photography, or it might be still life photography, where you take a very deliberate kind of approach. And having some of both of those in my life, or all of the things I do, is not just a both kind of answer. It gives me balance that I really appreciate as a photographer and as a creative individual. Certainly I would throw teaching in that mix too, because that is satisfying in a completely different way than photography is mostly. Every aspect of my life can be frustrating, and when I get frustrated with one, then I can focus on the other, and then I can go back and take a fresh approach to whatever it was that was getting frustrating. I kind of already talked about how I got started. I didn't have any internships. In terms of mentors, I was really lucky. My graduate program, once I was into the thesis portion, just working on my thesis project, they had what they called directed studies, where I could work with individuals, and one of the person I worked with was one of the professors at the school who I really clicked with. But in pet photography, there was two people I really admired. One is Amanda Jones, and she does portraits. She's from the New England area, but she travels around and photographs people in the cities, and so she's very successful in what she does. She's got a good demand for her work. The other person is Trader Scott, and she had done a book called Shelter Dogs, about how all of these animals that are in shelters need to have a little extra help, because a lot of dogs are dying, and I wanted to be able to speak to a wider audience with my work. And so I was able to work a semester with each of these individuals. And Amanda Jones was very satisfying, just because I had known her for a really, really long time in terms of her work. So it was exciting to be able to work with her. And Treyer Scott, because I really admired what she was doing with her work, but also because my book deals directly came out of that semester's worth of work. And you know, having a book deal when you're pretty new to the industry is almost unheard of. So that was very, very fortunate for me. In terms of particular environments or subject difficult to photograph, I would say I don't enjoy event photography, weddings and bar bat mitzvahs or quinceañeras, and so I don't enjoy it. So I think that it's a little bit more of a challenge for me. And kind of related is group portraiture, which is a part of all of those things. Anytime you have more than one subject, it's going to make things more difficult. And not only because you need to arrange them in a pleasing way, but because they all have to be well exposed. They all have to be not mid-blink or all these kind of different things that could possibly go wrong. And so anytime you have a group portrait, that's definitely a challenging sort of subject to photograph.